So welcome to our podcast today. I'm delighted to be able to kick this off with one of the leaders that I've worked alongside for a long time. And I'm going to introduce her in a moment, but just to introduce myself, I'm Dr. Lynda Folan, and I'm an organizational psychologist, and so have spent all of my career working in organizations to help the people aspects be better. And now let me introduce you to Kate. Kate, it's a delight to have you here talking to us today and taking the time out of your busy diary to spend chatting about leadership. Just to let you know that Kate is the General Manager of Corporate Affairs for Chevron at the present moment, but has had a very esteemed career on a range of different areas, and so we're going to hear a bit about her career. So Kate, do you want to kick us off telling us a bit about what's brought you to this point in your career?
Thank you very much, Lynda. It is great to be part of this venture that you're kicking off. Who the hell am I? How did I get here? I guess I was always interested from a young age in politics. I remember a school librarian giving me a biography of a politician, and that was it. I was off. And so my early career, I studied law and I practiced law for a while, but I quickly joined the Foreign Service at DFAT, here in Australia it's called. I went off on an international assignment with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to Indonesia. I was pretty young. That was pretty influential period in my career. Then I came back to Australia and I went directly into politics. I went and worked for Kevin Rudd. He was the leader of the opposition at the time, but then became Australian Prime Minister.
And with your assistance.
With my assistance, yes. And then I also spent some time working as Chief of Staff to the Foreign Minister in the Rudd government. That was Stephen Smith. And from there, I was recruited into Chevron, which is a big oil and gas company. And I've had multiple roles in that company. I think quite a dramatic shift from public service and government into the private sector. But I really haven't looked back. I've found corporate life very engaging, probably more political than government.
Definitely can be.
Which has kept me engaged. And so if I think about like a through theme in my career, it really has been about influence. From inside a government, as a diplomat influencing a foreign government, in politics, influencing on the inside of government, influencing the public to persuade people of their opinions, and then coming into the corporation, influencing the external stakeholders that we have, and also influencing decision makers inside the company. So I think I'm a purveyor of influence, but really how I got there was my interest in politics. And I think if you dig deeper into that, that's an interest in people and how they understand the world and what motivates them.
Yeah, so deep interest in people that kind of blossomed into that political environment. Law generally isn't a people-focused industry. It's about working with people, but it's not as people-focused as, say, a corporation. How did you find that difference between being in a pure political environment to then being in a corporation in terms of how you transition your influence that you talk about from the political environment into the corporate environment?
Yeah, bizarrely, I think that corporate life has had less restrictions for me, even though, you're bound by shareholder need, business need, but somehow it was a bit more of a blank page than government, which is quite institutionalised. So I responded well to that. It was a very, very different working environment. So in government, in the various roles I had in government, I was working with a lot of people like me who had a similar skill set to me. and going into this corporation with a very engineering mindset, very technically based decision making, that was a real puzzle for me to understand how to influence outcomes in that organisation. And really, for me, it's been a journey even now after about 15 years in the company, that the way I see the world, understand things, make decisions for myself, prioritise work is very, very different from the people around me. And so how to survive and thrive in an organisation where I'm coming at the world from a very different perspective than the people I work with.
Yeah, and we've chatted about that quite a lot over the years, that you bring something different to that environment, but you still have to work within that context. So let's talk a little bit about that. The context of your career has been in dominantly male environments. Even when you were in politics, it was there was a large percentage of men in the senior roles that you would have been working in. What for you were whether they were conscious or unconscious, and you noticed them later, what were the biggest things that you noticed as a female in those male-dominated environments?
Well, I think the way that I've thought about that has really changed over the course of my career. When you're young and starting out in your career, you don't know any different, number one. But also, not only are you the only woman in the room, but you're also maybe the youngest person and the most inexperienced person in the room. And so perhaps I was less aware. I mean, I was definitely often aware that I was the only woman in a room or in a decision, in a meeting. But I didn't always know if the way things were running in that meeting for me was due to my lack of experience or my age, or in fact my gender. I think as I've grown older and more confident in my capabilities and just had more exposure to the world, I have a better sense of when things are panning out in a certain way because perhaps more because of my gender, and then age and the experience, or as we talked about, my skill set being so different from the company, with the majority of people in the company I work with, and whether it's a dismissiveness of that skill set, is corporate affairs really super important. So I think I've grown with confidence over time, and I've also maybe been more willing to acknowledge it, even just for myself. When there are barriers for me as a woman. I definitely think that's a confidence thing, but also probably an experience thing where, you're seeing things repeatedly over time. And of course, the good news is that there are more women. I mean, still pretty light on in the oil and gas sector, but there are more women around, and that has also helped me to understand, when there's a couple of you together and you're sharing information and understanding, oh yeah, hey, this isn't quite right, or yeah, I'm not alone, this isn't just my own self-doubt or whatever in the back of my head.
Yeah, so having some colleagues in an environment almost makes it more real and you can assess it more.
Yes.
To a certain extent. Yeah. Whereas if you're on your own, you're just simply questioning, is that me or is it the context?
Yes, and if you make a decision, want to tackle it, that's a lot of energy, a lot of political capital that you're going to put into sort of taking it on. And I think I have done that from time to time, but there's definitely a lot of times where I haven't. You let things go through to the keeper because it's easier and you can't fight every battle. I think what I've experienced in recent years with other female executives sitting in the room alongside me, that kind of, we bolster each other. There's a kind of a look across the room, are we going to do this? Yes, we're going on over. We're going to challenge this. So that feeling of not being alone has been quite empowering in recent years.
Do you have a specific incident in mind where have there been specific moments where you've kind of stepped forward and gone, no, I'm not going to keep quiet? And what have been the ripple effects around those?
Yeah, so I can think of two. One, I'm not sure how successful I was in either, but certainly the early one in my career was we were in a meeting. I was the only woman. I was a lot younger than everybody else in the room. And I had presented, and a male colleague just totally dismissed my presentation, didn't make eye contact with me while he did it, and also did it, I don't know how to describe this, but like he wasn't even really speaking. Like he was grunting or something. Like he was kind of just in a very sort of physical way saying, just being dismissive of what my contribution. And it just touched a raw nerve for me. So I was enraged, and I absolutely eviscerated the guy. Like, I was vicious, and I took him down. And I think all of the other men in the room who knew both of us really well were very surprised that it escalated so quickly, and also was surprised at what it looked like when I lashed out.
Yeah.
So after that, a lot of my colleagues who cared about me came to say, oh, that was a bit much. No, they didn't say, are you okay? They said, oh, that was a bit much. You should maybe apologise, and I'm like, well, are you going to ask him to apologise? But the takeaway I had from that is they didn't see the disrespect in the way that I did, the way that it triggered me. And I also just thought, I spent a career swallowing those things and just powering on through. And for whatever reason on that day, I wasn't able to manage it really in a professional. I don't think I was unprofessional, but it was uncontrolled.
Yeah. You were angry, and
I was visibly angry.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that reflected well on me, for people in that room who respected me and cared about my career. I think they thought that was a fail on my part that I reacted in that way. A few years later, it's kind of a similar event. I wasn't defending myself, though. I was defending another woman. So we were in a group meeting, and an Asian woman, so small, petite woman, was trying to make her voice heard, and a group of men just continually, like they just were talking right over the top of her. She was their equal in terms of seniority in the organisation, and they were oblivious to the fact that they were unconscious about the way that they were speaking over the top of her. And I found it so infuriating that I kind of yelled out, "Shut up and listen."
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, okay. And they were kind of shocked enough that they did stop. But afterwards, interestingly, it was a woman who came up to me afterwards. She also asked me to apologise for that, or to explain myself to that group. I was like, really? I think it's pretty obvious they were talking over a woman. Anyway, I did go and speak to a number of colleagues afterwards. But I think those two examples, one was just a rawness that was uncontrolled.
Yeah.
The second one was a bit more planned and considered, but also there are times where you just pushed so far and you have to step up. I think after those two events, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I'm more deliberate now about when I'm going to intervene.
Yeah.
And
more conscious stepping in. Yeah.
Thinking about how I'm going to do it rather than reacting in the moment. But also have made a commitment to do it more often, especially feeling the responsibility of the roles that I have in the organisation now, where if I'm one of those senior women in the organisation and I'm not going to speak up, then who is going to?
Yeah.
So sort of feeling a bit more responsibility to do that, and hopefully being a bit more thoughtful about that.
Yeah, one of the things we've noticed over the last few years is that certainly globally we're seeing women stand up more publicly, the Me Too movement and things like that. And from a racial perspective, we've seen more people stand up. Do you think that's helped women in the workplace to be more conscious about standing up to stuff, or do you think we're still a long way from being prepared to stand up in the workplace?
Oh, I think we're a long way away from that, but I do think it's changing. And one of the things that's changing is women talking about it more openly. and perhaps that's just with their female peers, but that surfacing of these things is empowering for women. A little bit like I just mentioned about having another woman sit with me on a leadership team has given me more confidence to go forward, I think. So I definitely think these issues are coming to the surface more. Women are talking about it even just amongst themselves, and that is bringing about change. I think we're still a long way away from, a free-for-all, but I think I think there is a shift going on in our society. It won't be as quick as some of us would like it to be, but I think it's starting to move. And I also think younger men, I think about some of the men I work with, their whole career, they've also worked in male-dominated workplaces. And so I think for the next generation of men, that won't be their experience. I'm not saying that'll make them perfect, but I think they'll have a different perspective.
Yeah, and I think we are starting to see that with younger men and younger women being more prepared to step up and say things that are not right. Now, you took your organisation through a really tough period, through all the sexual harassment conversations that went on. Give us a bit of a sense of the pressure that put on you as kind of one of the senior leaders who's female in that environment. That would have put a huge amount of pressure on you to stand up and be seen to be doing the right thing. And when it would have been a very painful process for the organisation.
Yeah, I think I wasn't alone in that. I think there was a small group of people who felt that it was worth it. So it takes a lot out of people individually to advocate on this. I think I went on a journey. I think my peers and my male peers also went on a journey just to understand some new concepts. So it challenged me to think about how to influence the way people think about these really difficult, sensitive things, hard to talk about things. I guess I'm a communicator and a feminist, and how to influence people was fascinating to me. So it was intellectually an interesting challenge, but it was personally challenging as well, because a reflection on your own experiences in the workplace and in life, but also really, have I always stood up for people? Have I been part of a system that has failed to address some of these behaviours that we don't find acceptable? And so like having that self-reflection about, well, what has my role been?
Have I tolerated?
Yes, have I tolerated? Have I looked the other way? What more could I have done and challenge myself? So I think one thing was that was kind of amazing about the experience was to have a small, tight-knit group. I quickly realised this group was going to be under a lot of psychological pressure, to put no finer point on it. And so we got ourselves some coaching support, and we thought about how we're going to support each other through that. So we had weekly meetings. We had a bit of a check-in. How are you feeling today? I'm feeling rage. Oh, I'm feeling sadness. Oh, no, I'm feeling like we're making progress. And so we could just talk about how we were feeling, to
that up and down,
let it out before we then got into what we had to do. And I think certainly I found it helpful, but I think it helped create a bond and a team, so we could support each other. Someone's up, someone's down.
Yeah, and it's a really challenging environment to actually navigate. So give us a bit of a sense of, during a career, we have ups and downs, no doubt, and you will have been the same as anyone else. But how have you managed your energy levels? Because you talked about, getting really cross at one stage because you were worked up. We know that leaders need to take care of themselves and take care of their resilience levels to manage their influence. So talk to us a bit about how you balance that, because your job's pretty demanding. It requires a lot of you, but you also need to take care of your own health and well-being in that, so that you don't get to those points and you can be more conscious about things. So just talk us through how you manage your well-being.
Yeah, so I think even, very early on in my career, without the benefit of all the wisdom and also, frankly, Lynda, your support to help me understand, what I need at different times, even very, very early on in my career in stressful working environments in politics, knowing that I had to address the mental side of the stress, finding ways to do that, and really the key is to change the way you're thinking about a problem, and that can help you change the way you're feeling about it, right? So like going deep inside to help you reframe a challenge. Someone's really pissed you off, be curious about how did that, why are they behaving that way? I can't really understand why they would be such an idiot, But so trying to reframe mentally. So that's one thing that I've learned and honed my ability to do that over time. Related to that sort of mental health is meditation. I've found super helpful. Early in my life, in my personal life, I would meditate at times of sort of stress and then stop doing it when things got bit better, under control. And it's like, hang on a minute, why aren't I making this a more regular practice? I have a Dutch petroleum engineer friend who's very pragmatic and blunt, and she's just like, well, why don't you do it every day? And I'm like, I've got to get up early. And she's like, set your alarm for 10 minutes earlier. And I'm like, okay. Actually, it's been a big change for me to be consistently disciplined about meditation. It just gives me space in my day to give my brain a rest and reset. And then increasingly also the mental break and the meditation isn't also helpful to me, but I think I've recently learned some techniques to really address more my whole of my body. Yeah. And so I'm breathing. I'm really into breathing exercises. Yeah. I found it quite amazing I feel like it's like hitting the reset button. Yeah. At the end of the week to do a beautiful breathwork class. That's very much less in my head and more in my body. Walking by the ocean, moving closer to the ocean, things like that. So yes, I definitely need that time and with wisdom have got more regulated about it. I'm not a very organised. I'm not a very structured person. Yeah, the way my brain works, the way the way I like to be. You're more creative. It's not structured, and so part of me kind of resists structure. But I have found regular meditation, regular breathing classes, learning that there's a benefit to that has allowed me to like build a little bit of structure into my life, but it's not my preferred mode of operation.
You don't want to get up. Oh, it's a David Goggins who talks about, get up at 5 a.m. and do your serious physical. That's not your natural style, but you've taught yourself some discipline around that. And I think we know that we need some discipline around our own self-care. There's no two ways about it. All the research now is showing, and it's great that you're talking about meditation because the neuroscientists, the psychologists, everyone agrees that meditation is one of the key strategies to keeping balance and health and mental health.
I just know the days that I meditate go better than the days that I don't. And invariably the days that I don't is because I'm like in a rush or, I don't have time. And of course, those are the days where really I probably needed it more than anything else. So I think what's helped me bring it into my life is seeing the benefits. And so once you can see that benefit, then it doesn't feel like such a chore to schedule it.
Yeah. And I think your natural style is more go with the flow, but having those disciplines in place helps you to go with the flow even better during your day. So that's great. And the breathing work, obviously, we're seeing lots of research come out around breathing, meditations like yoga, tai chi, any of those type of strategies fantastic for managing your mental and emotional health and well-being. So that's fantastic. And just if you could, knowing what you know now, if you could go back to Kate when she first started her career in politics, what kind of advice would you give to your younger self and give to other leaders who are growing in their leadership role?
I mean, I would cheer her on for always sort of making tangential choices and taking risks. I think not following the ordinary path. So I would encourage her to continue to do that. I do think that I've made personal sacrifices that I think I could have managed better. And I also think that they probably were unconscious at the time. So maybe just being a bit more conscious of the choices I was making. Those jobs in politics, I was, drinking 10 cups of coffee and not having anything to eat or going to the bathroom until question time, which is at 2:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Those are very poor choices and totally not required. I could have, if I'd been more conscious about what was going on, could have had they're not healthy lifestyles, but I could have had a slightly healthier lifestyle and I'm sure been much more productive for it. So I think those things were unconscious for me. I was so focused on the work that I wasn't focused on those things. So I think maybe being a little bit more aware.
Conscious of those choices you make. Because your career's taken you to a number of different countries and potentially could keep taking you to a number of different countries, continuing. Talk us through some of those choices you made, those seminal moments that you kind of went, oh, I'm going to go and work in the US for 2 years, or oh, I'm going to go to work in Thailand as you did. So talk us through those kind of seminal moments and what made you, because you've just articulated that you didn't take the straight and narrow path. You have taken some really interesting curves in your career. What were those big decision making?
Well, I think curiosity has driven a lot of, that looks interesting over there. Maybe I'll, make a shift and move that way. And I think that's happened lots of times in my career. I started to be a lawyer. I was working as a lawyer. I enjoyed it. Oh, I'll do the public service test and try for the foreign service. Oh, go off to Indonesia. It was at random. I mean, I spoke French and German and, send me to Indonesia, why don't you?
No French or German there.
Yeah, coming back to Australia and thinking, I'll go work up at Parliament House. Like all of those things involved a bit of risk. And also choosing the less obvious, sort of choosing the tangent. I think part of the reason that I did that was A, open to the world, open to new experiences, B, not really perceiving that I was actually risking anything. So
yes.
So I think for others that might have been a risky choice, but for me, I wasn't feeling like there was
a risk.
Yeah, or there was a trade-off in those decisions. I look back now and I see that there were trade-offs, but I wasn't feeling that, and so there wasn't, at the time.
So you naturally just jumped into those, didn't really think about, hey, that's a risk heading off to another country. What's going to happen when I go back?
Yeah. Well, I think I sort of just had a more is more philosophy. But I think now, thinking now about my career, would I take another international assignment? Yes, but I'm going to think a bit harder about what that really means. Of course, I've had a few now, so I know what it entails. But, so I'm just trying to be a bit more conscious about these, not just excited by the shiny, the new intellectual challenge, also thinking about what it means beyond.
Yes. And I think we underestimate the changing of country, the pressure it puts on you. I've done it like you plenty of times. And every time you move, even if it's only for a period of time, it does put a different level of personal pressure on you.
Yeah, I recently was back in Thailand for business and reflecting on my life there. And in many respects, I just had a fabulous lifestyle. But when you are living overseas away from your home base, there's just a small, low-level aggravation of everything just being a little bit harder. Like, you don't know where to find, you don't know which store to go to find, this life essential or that. Everything's just a little bit harder. Everything's a bit more exciting too, because everything's new people, new environment, new ways of working. I've certainly found the international assignments really, one of the best things about it is like learning to operate within a different culture.
Yeah.
The Thai culture. I mean, my personality type is like the polar opposite of the Thai people. They're indirect, they're discreet. I'm like, kick down the door. This is, what I think. What do you think about what I think? And the Aussie versus the Thai culture. So thinking about how, and just being recently back in Thailand for an extended period and just realizing, I've got to really think about how can I enlist these people, encourage them to, work with me on this problem. So, and just the intellectual challenge of that. Again, I think just coming back to this root theme throughout my career around people and understanding what
an influence.
Yeah, how to influence them, how they're thinking about the world, and how to drive them to, make the decision you want them to make.
And if you look back, where have been the biggest moments of challenge for you in your career? Where have you gone, I'm not sure I'm doing this right. Should I be doing something different? Because you have had such a diverse career. You've spent chunks of time in the US, Thailand, Indonesia. You also go in and out of Europe a fair chunk. You've worked quite extensively in Australia. You've had such different environments. Where are the moments where you've gone, this is tough. I'm going to really need to have to toughen out in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think a really pivotal moment for me in my career was quite early on. I mean, I applied for a very senior role, and it was ballsy to do it. And but I did think, I looked around and I thought, I don't think there's anyone else in this organisation that could do this job. I'm going to apply for it. So they said to me, we think you've got a lot of potential, Kate, but we'd like to see you. We'd like to test your leadership a little bit more. And I'm like, you're talking about, I am a leader. I've always been a leader. I didn't really understand what they wanted from me, what the gap was. I couldn't understand that gap. But anyway, as my reward for applying for a job that I was perhaps not quite ready for, I was asked to manage a team, a really seriously underperforming team. And I never actually had that experience before. I'd really worked with competent professionals and, maybe not perfect, but like largely, delivering and performing. This is a really dysfunctional team, a lot of challenges, and that really challenged me. And it wasn't fun. It was really not that much fun on a day-to-day basis. But I learned some really important lessons. And I think I proved to myself that I could do it. But definitely it was also in a subject area that I wasn't familiar. So inheriting a team in an area where I didn't have the subject matter expertise. And I just didn't know which way was up for a while there. But that was hugely influential for me. Yeah, like really helped me understand how I could. Actually, the thing I really learned about that was about building a team culture, addressing toxic behaviours.
Yeah.
And how much that impacts our experience of work, but also our performance at work when we're operating in a toxic culture. So I have zero tolerance for that now, and that's been a bit of a focus,
a shift for you. Yeah. So you put yourself in for this higher level job. They said no, but here's a problem. Why don't you fix this and prove to us that you're a leader? And that's what leadership is, isn't it? It is stepping in and actually assessing the situation, going, this is what needs to shift and how can I shift that?
Yeah, I mean, there were so many things about that job that I learned, but one of the things was to ask for help. That's sort of really, I stepped in and I saw the problem straight away, and then I was like, wow, I don't really know where to start. And one of the first places to start was, well, I don't have the subject matter expertise. I need help on that score, and asking for help and being kind of surprised that people were like, oh, okay, sure, that I could get that help when I asked for it really clearly. So it was perhaps not my natural style to like say, I don't know what I'm doing, can I have some help? But that was really important.
And as you reflect, at different points in our career, we reflect back on what we've done, what we've achieved. What would you say are your biggest achievements that you kind of would like, if you had someone honouring you later on in your career, what would you want them to honour you for? What are the big seminal kind of achievements that you think you've had?
Oh, I don't know. I'm probably not ready to do a career obituary, but I do think some of the moments where I felt the most satisfaction have been seeing individuals change the way they think about themselves and their work, and really just go on and do amazing things. And
so helping people to grow their own capability.
Just do that shifting. Yeah, like it's like a Jedi mind trick, if you can change the way that you're thinking about a problem, including like maybe that problem is your own career or what you're bringing to the, and then seeing people take off. That's happened a few times in my career, and I find it incredibly rewarding. It's not my success, it's their success, but somehow that makes it sweeter.
But you've been a part of that shifting of that individual.
Yeah. I think the other thing is I feel like one of the things I bring to the table is being able to see problems and also solutions a bit further into the distance than other people. And so bringing the organisation or bringing a team closer to seeing that and acting on it, regardless of what the actual outcome is, just sort of bringing the potential.
So helping people to see that future.
Helping people to see the future, and start getting after it and start being proactive, regardless of what the actual outcome of that is. I think that's also another sort of intangible area where I feel satisfaction when I can see it.
And you do that a lot, actually, in your career, because you help your organisation to look at some of the future challenges and go, well, how are we going to handle that? That's a big part of what you do.
It is, and it's a point of frustration for me. I have to manage, I feel like this is so obvious. Why can't everybody see it? But actually, I'm trained to see it, and I'm paid to be able to see it. And my job then is to help the organisation
to step forward into that. That's one of the unique characteristics that you have as well. So we all bring our own personality to our leadership, and we all bring who we are. That's part of who you are, isn't it? That ability to look forward into the future.
And I do think for a long time, when I first joined Chevron, I feel like a bit of a fraud. Like, I can't believe they're paying me to do this. This is so obvious. This is so, like, how do they not just instinctively know this? And starting to learn, well, no, that is actually a skill. It's experience that I have that I'm bringing to the table, and that's valuable. And I started out my career as a lawyer, and it's very intellectual work, cerebral,
and quite detailed.
Yeah. And this work that I do is so intangible and hard to describe. And I think for quite a long time, I felt that it was less than, that it wasn't as highly skilled as, being a lawyer. I guess, but probably still do have a little bit of a cringe factor about that. It's definitely more cerebral. This is more instinctive.
Yeah.
But there's still thinking and analysis that sits behind the instinct.
And you have to justify the instinct, otherwise you wouldn't be able to influence people.
Yeah. Yeah. So you really helped me with that very early on when we started working together to help me understand that nobody at the company really understood what I did, or more importantly, how I did it. And so being able to think through how to make that visible,
articulate it in a way that influences people. Yeah, and most of your corporate career, outside of your the chunk of time in politics, you've been in that influence role where the business is asking you to actually lead them forward in some very murky waters. Because, the mining sector is going through a really big transition at the moment, not just with the gender issues, but with, zero emission. There's so many things pressurizing the mining sector. If you're not looking forward, you're really getting behind the eighth ball as an organization. So having to lead your organization through that, in a sense, is a hugely important role that you play.
Yes, there's a lot of change in the world that is impacting our industry and, of course, our company and individual decisions that we're making. And it's hard to get your head around the scale of the change, the speed of the change. But with those changes also comes opportunity. So it's easy to be frightened by them, but there's also there's room to, create new product lines and carve our way. And I really do believe that our company's got a role to play in the future, but it is a challenging shift in community expectations for sure. And so that can be hard for more technically minded people who just want to be left alone with their, with their modelling of the reservoir and not have to worry about those things. That's fine. But so it's a challenging time for our company, no doubt about it. But there's always something. There's always some change. The world doesn't stand still.
Yeah. And what we're seeing is the pace of change is going even faster. COVID really kind of escalated that pace of change. Even little things like AI, ChatGPT, working from home challenges, all of those sorts of things that we're grappling with. And those are just some of the minor things. For you guys, it's some big ticket items that you're trying.
Just COVID. I know COVID was challenging, on so many levels for businesses and for individuals. But it just gives me a lot of confidence that we can flex. We did. The whole world very quickly flexed, and we were able to continue to operate our business. Humans were able to continue to. The thing I find remarkable is how many ways we found to connect with each other when we suddenly found ourselves apart. So I feel like the human race really responded very quickly and innovatively to a catastrophic, change in our external environment. And so that just gives me confidence that these other challenges that we will be able to
manage.
Yeah. And the other thing about COVID is you don't go backwards. So we made all those shifts, where we're locked down and the like, and the world has not gone back to the way it was before then, because once you've made that progress, there's no sort of
going back.
So I feel optimistic about what COVID showed us.
One of the things we've seen through the COVID experience is the huge importance in a workplace around connection. The social isolation, all of that happened during COVID, particularly in some of the locations where it was more dominant and people were away from the workplace for longer chunks of time. What are some of the strategies you've used to not so much during COVID, because we all experience different things, but as we've come out of COVID, how are you leveraging the importance of connection? Because we know it's really important in the workplace. What are some of the things you and your teams are doing?
Yeah, the team that I was leading during COVID were largely extroverted, not 100%, but also our jobs were connecting with stakeholders. So we brought that skill set to how we managed ourselves during COVID. The team really was quite innovative about how we did that during that sort of critical period. So I learned a lot from that, including just that strong desire to connect and how important it is for people and for me. So coming out of COVID, I think one of the things is there's this real demand pull for people to be face-to-face.
Yeah.
I moved into an international role now where, people are traveling for long distances to be together for a week, and it's very intense during that period. But creating those opportunities, I think we've definitely proven as a global multinational that we can all work remotely from our spare rooms, but we don't want to, not 100% of the time. We won't go back to 100% in the office. COVID means I can do an international role from my spare room in here in Perth, but we're not going to go. We still have that desire to connect, and I think the company is creating those opportunities for people to do it. And I feel personally that it's very rewarding for me, but I can just even see how meaningful it is for other peers who might be less sort of extroverted than me. So I think learning that what we want and how useful it can be, from a business perspective, to bring people face to face and have those opportunities. To connect, leverage the technology, leverage what we've learned about remote working, but also be deliberate about creating those opportunities to come together.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the organisations that haven't got that quite right are really battling from a cultural perspective. So it does definitely, I'm seeing that more and more. If you don't get enough face-to-face, you start to undermine the organisation's culture, and that's key in today's world, creating that healthy culture that supports people to be the best that they can be. So as we start to wrap up our time together, I'd like to hear from you. If you could give one piece of advice to leaders, and it doesn't have to be gender-based, leaders across the globe, around what's the one thing that you would do more of if you had your time again, but you've also done lots of over your career? What's that one piece of advice you'd give to someone who's in a leadership role?
Well, I think leadership is something that is just continual. It's also the job. I think it took me a while in my career to learn that the job wasn't like getting everything done. It was leading others to help them get it done in the best possible way. So focus on your leadership over the doing. And as you get more senior in the organisation, you should spend more and more time on that. And it's not a nice add-on. It is the job, the leadership. But I think one leadership journey for me has been understand there's a way I want to lead. Like there's my natural style, who I am, Kate Callaghan, how I like to show up. And that works in a lot of situations. That's how I kind of got started on my journey. But it's not going to work for every situation. It's not going to work for every person that I'm working with. And so learning that I have to change and I need to adjust to be the leader that other people need, not just the leader who I want to be. And I think that learning will be continual. I mean, as you move into different roles and have different challenges that you're leading, you're going to have to learn to adjust your style to the circumstances and to the people you're working with. And so it's a journey, and then you're never done. And it can be hard work, but it is work. And I think understanding that is the work, that's the job as you have more responsibility.
Yeah. So your advice would be, first off, that understanding that the leadership is the job, not the technical aspects.
Yes.
You might have been promoted because you're a fantastic technical expert, but once you take on that leadership role, that is the job. And also that you are naturally good at who you are, but in your leadership, you've got to adapt and change your style of what you deliver to people to get the most out of that.
Yes, and what's got you here won't get you there. I mean, I don't know, someone smarter than me coined some similar phrase, right? But you have to keep learning if you want to keep growing.
That continuous learning. Yeah, I remember my son asking me once, Mom, aren't you too old to be studying? And I went, no, never. Yeah, that continues.
Or you say, well, I've done that before and I've done that. And it's like, oh, that we don't just like tick a box and that's done. You don't have to go back to it. You know, there's always new things to learn.
Yeah, and particularly in that space of what we describe as emotional intelligence, that adapting to emotional pressures when you are put under that pressure with someone being disrespectful, how you're going to respond to that. That we're learning all the time, and it's a growth piece. Yeah.
But I also think, understanding why did I react, understand your own reactions.
Yeah.
Because that'll help you manage them in the future. I'm not saying if there's an injustice, don't be angry about that, but understand why in that moment I responded in that way and how everyone else in the room responded. Digging a bit deeper into not me. Why did that person say that and that really pissed me off, but like, why did I respond in that way when actually over the course of my career I've withstood worse.
Way worse, yeah, probably, yeah. And that ability to self-reflect is part of that ongoing learning journey. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know you're super busy trying to get lots of stuff done. So really appreciate your time and hearing about your leadership journey and the challenges that you face, but also the amazing opportunities you've managed to create in your career over a chunk of time. So thank you so much for your time, Kat.
Thanks, Lynda, and thanks for all your support through much of that journey.
Pleasure. Thank you.